For Coach Bud Grant and the Minnesota Vikings, the season opened on September 16th in Metropolitan Stadium. And following an undefeated preseason, the Vikings were ready for the always powerful Oakland Raiders. John Gilliam gave the Vikings an early 10-point lead, but Fran Tarkenton found himself trailing 16-10 late in the third quarter. Tight end Stu Voigt rolled the Vikings into scoring position, and one play later, Fran Tarkenton hit rookie Chuck Foreman, who twisted his way to the go-ahead touchdown. Old reliable Bill Brown added the clincher, and Minnesota wrapped up an impressive team victory 24-16. Week 2 found the Vikings in Chicago for the first of 3 consecutive Central Division battles. Against the Bears, Chuck Foreman literally burst to the front in the Rookie of the Year race, as time after time he found his way into the Chicago secondary. Chuck Foreman ran for 116 yards. Fran Tarkenton passed for the game's only touchdown. And Fred Cox kicked 5 field goals as the Vikings again came from behind to win 22-13. The returning heroes of the offense were welcomed home the following week. But against the defending Central champion Green Bay Packers, a different kind of game was in store. As one Packer said afterward, they just poured in on us. In a game decided by first downs instead of by touchdowns, the Vikings out-hit and out-kicked the Packers 11-3. Week 4 found the Vikings in Detroit, where 2 early errors by the Lions special team set up 2 touchdowns in the first 4.5 minutes, both on scoring passes to Ed Marinaro. The Vikings won their 4th straight, 23-9. Next, the Vikings put their undefeated streak on the line against the San Francisco 49ers, a team they had not beaten in their last 3 tries. John Gilliam again provided an early lead, but Steve Spurrier completed 31 passes, the most ever against the Vikings. And the outcome was in doubt until 2 crucial fourth-quarter interceptions by Paul Krause saved a 5th straight victory, 17-13. Back home for a 4-game stand, the Vikings next faced their old friend Roman Gabriel, now the leader of the surprisingly tough Philadelphia Eagles. Fran Tarkenton had the perfect antidote for any kind of trouble. Number 42, John Gilliam. Fran Tarkenton connected on 16 of 21 passes, including 6 to John Gilliam, who totaled 160 yards and scored 2 touchdowns, as the Vikings offense hit its stride and outscored the Eagles 28-21 for a 6th consecutive win. Then came Week 7 and a battle of the Titans as the NFL's only unbeaten teams squared off against each other. The Los Angeles Rams had the league's top-rated offense, but the only touchdown of the game came on a short pass to Chuck Foreman. The rest was up to the Vikings defense, and they were magnificent. Leading 10-9 with time running out, Jeff Seaman blitzed John Hadle out of field goal range. And with their 7th consecutive win, the Vikings had equaled their victory total of the previous season and were the only undefeated team in the league. The always formidable Cleveland Browns were next for the Vikings, but no matter what the Browns tried, there was a Viking ready to turn the play around for Minnesota. The Viking defense held Cleveland to just 4 first downs and no touchdowns, while the offense provided 23 first downs and some of the year's most spectacular plays by Fran Tarkenton and Stu Voigt. Cleveland became Minnesota's 8th consecutive victim, 26-3. And the Vikings rolled on to Week 9 in the rematch with the revitalized and ravenously hungry Detroit Lions. Detroit scored first, but once again, weird special team play hurt the Lions and helped the Vikings. Wally Hilgenberg's touchdown put the Vikings ahead, and then the clock rolled back to the 60s as Fran Tarkenton handed off to Dave Osborne 14 times for 79 yards, and to the old bowling ball Bill Brown 18 times for 103 yards. Fran Tarkenton enjoyed another typically efficient afternoon as he hit on 11 of 15 passes, including another touchdown to John Gilliam. The offensive line devastated the Detroit defense, opening the way to the Vikings' 9th straight victory of the season and their 12th straight over the Lions, 28-7. Not only were the Vikings the lone undefeated team in the NFL, but after just 9 weeks, they had already clinched the Central Division title for the 5th time in the past 6 years. In Minnesota, he was Bob Lee. In Atlanta, he was General Robert M. Lee, and he was looking for an end to the Vikings' unbeaten streak and for a 6th consecutive win for the Falcons. The Vikings' winning streak finally ended in Atlanta, 20-14. The following week was the last home game of the regular season. Governor Anderson officially proclaimed it Carl Kasulke Day. The former Minnesota strong safety had been paralyzed from the chest down in a motorcycle crash the day before training camp opened, and now he was making his first public appearance since the accident. As John Gilliam said, "I don't think we can ever do enough to repay him for what he's done for us." In the game itself, the Vikings rolled up 31 points against the Bears, of which 12 were scored by John Gilliam, who later presented the game ball to Carl Kasulke. The regular season ended with 12 wins and 2 losses, a record which tied for the best in the NFL. And one of the reasons for that record was Bud Grant's outstanding offensive line, anchored at left tackle by Captain Grady Alderman. At left guard was Ed White, the world's arm wrestling champion. At center was Mick Tingelhoff, a 7-time All-Pro who made himself one of the game's most celebrated free agents. Sharing right guard were John Henry Ward until he broke his leg, and number 64, veteran Milt Sunday. Ron Yeri was again an All-Pro, and a major contributor to the health and welfare of Francis Asbury Tarkenton, who led the entire NFL in passing percentage and in fewest interceptions while directing a masterfully coordinated Minnesota offense. An offense which attacked the opposition with more than 2,000 yards in both rushing and passing. Among Tarkenton's receivers were 6 who averaged at least 1 catch per game. 3 of these were running backs. Oscar Reed, the multi-talented rookie Chuck Foreman, and the second-year man from the Ivy League, Ed Marinaro. At one wide receiver spot, Tarkenton could call on the experience of 14 pro seasons and former Green Bay Packer Carroll Dale. From the tight end position, Tarkenton could rely on Stu Voigt to make the key catch, no matter how heavy the traffic. When it came time for the big play, week after week, Tarkenton looked for and found Minnesota's Mr. Smooth, John Gilliam. John Gilliam scored 9 touchdowns and caught 42 passes for more than 900 yards as he led his team in receiving for the 5th straight year. And no matter who was at quarterback, Fran Tarkenton or his backup Bob Berry, the man to look for was John Gilliam. The running game achieved new heights in '73. Fran Tarkenton ran his career rushing total past 3,300 yards with a lifetime average of 6 yards a try. With Tarkenton in the backfield most of the year was the man they called the Seed, Oscar Reed, with a solid 4 yards per carry. And then there was number 44, Walter Eugene Chuck Foreman, the Vikings' first authentic breakaway back since the early years of Tommy Mason. Despite several nagging injuries, Foreman handled the ball more than 200 times for a total of almost 1,200 yards in total offense and was consensus NFC Rookie of the Year for 1973.
All right, let's huddle up. Come on, guys, let's get it going. All right, make sure you're onside. Don't let anybody offside. First man down there. We're riding a wild horse. Let's go now. I'll beat you to the tackle, Nate.
At age 35, Bill Brown was not just the oldest running back in the league, but as captain of the Vikings special teams, he was a rare blend of experience and enthusiasm. As Brown said, that retirement talk just makes me work that much harder. Bill Brown was an inspiration to the rest of the Vikings' excellent special teams, of which the more visible members were punter Mike Eischeid, an expert at moving the ball around for favorable field position, and Fred Cox, who passed the 1,000-point mark and became number 4 on the NFL's all-time scoring list. The Minnesota defense returned to good health in '73 as they gave up the fewest points in the NFC and the fewest touchdowns in the entire league, an average of less than 1 a game. The defensive secondary forced its share of turnovers. The most spectacular was by Terry Brown against the New York Giants. Terry Brown is an example of the quality depth which waits behind men like free safety Paul Krause, number 22, the NFL's leading active interceptor and 3rd on the all-time list. And men like strong safety Jeff Wright, number 23, the 3rd-year man from the University of Minnesota. And left cornerback Nate Wright, number 43, the other half of the Minnesota Vikings' own particular version of the Wright brothers. At right cornerback was Bobby Bryant, 170 pounds of true grit, and the NFC's leading interceptor for the year with 7. The Viking linebackers combined youth with savvy. On the outside, there was experience in 10-year veteran Wally Hilgenberg on one side and 12-year veteran Roy Winston on the other. In the middle, there was youth and a developing star in second-year man Jeff Seaman, number 50. At defensive tackle were perennial All-Pro Alan Page and strongman Gary Larson. At end were All-Pro Carl Eller and Captain Jim Marshall, the Iron Man. The fifth man was TV star Bob Lertzema. The Viking front four has been an inseparable unit since 1967, when Alan Page arrived from Notre Dame. All nicknames aside, the Viking front four is quite simply one of the best in pro football history and the foundation for one of the best defensive teams ever to play the game. December 22nd, 1973, the opening game of the NFL playoffs. Most of the Vikings had been there before, but two who had not been there were Fran Tarkenton and John Gilliam. In their first crucial game in 6 weeks, the Vikings were tight at the start, and they trailed the Washington Redskins 7-3 at the half. The man who finally got things going was Oscar Reed, who accounted for 171 yards running and receiving. As Reed said after the game, since early in the season, they'd been keying on Chuck Foreman. I'm not the world's greatest pass catcher or runner, but given a little room, I'll use what I've got. Twice, Billy Kilmer put the Redskins ahead, but then Carl Eller told John Gilliam to shake it off, and with one kick, he blasted a blackboard to the floor. And in the second half, the Vikings twice came from behind to take the lead. While Metropolitan Stadium quivered with joy in the twilight, Fran Tarkenton performed still another of his miracles. Within 1 minute of the fourth quarter, Tarkenton found Gilliam twice for touchdowns. The Vikings won 27-20, and it was on to Dallas to play for the championship of the National Football Conference. Irving, Texas was not exactly friendly territory for Fran Tarkenton and the Vikings. But in his first championship game in 13 years of pro football, Tarkenton played the best game of his best season. His play selection and field generalship kept the Dallas Doomsday defense off balance throughout the game and enabled the Vikings to control the ball for almost the entire first half, which ended with Minnesota leading 10-0. In the third quarter, Mike Eischeid boomed a punt 58 yards from his own end zone. But a Dallas rookie named Golden Richards almost inspired the Cowboys to another championship. As a nation of pro football fans looked on, Fran Tarkenton showed the winner's touch. Just 3 plays after Dallas had scored, Tarkenton retreated and threw the ball just as far as he could. As he had done so often, John Gilliam scored the touchdown which broke the game open. Again, it was up to the defense, and the Purple Gang never looked better. The Cowboys tried everything in their playbook, but the Vikings just kept hammering the ball loose. Bobby Bryant's touchdown finished an almost perfect day for Minnesota. The Vikings won 27-10, not just because of Bryant and Gilliam and Tarkenton, but because 40 men had played a team sport about as well as it can be played.
For the Miami Dolphins, 1973 began amid the euphoria of victory over the Washington Redskins in Super Bowl VII. The sporting world hailed new champions and the coach who had led them to this moment in the sun. 5 months later, the Dolphins gathered again at Biscayne College for summer camp. It was a fact that not since the great Green Bay Packer teams of the mid-60s had a Super Bowl champion repeated the following season. But for Don Shula, there are no yesterdays, only today and tomorrow. His first step was to drive out complacency by pushing his team harder than ever through the stifling heat and sudden downpours of a South Florida summer. Shula hammered away at his concept of team, a concept that he delegated to each of his excellent assistants. In charge of the defense was innovative Bill Arnsparger. Given responsibility for the offense was veteran Bill McPeak. Coaching the defensive line was Mo Scarry, while Monty Clark coordinated the offensive line. Carl Tassif handled the offensive backs, and Tom Keene instructed the defensive backfield in the ways and means of the intricate Miami zone. For players and coaches, the team was the thing. Each man labored for this common goal, sharing the pain of post-practice sprints facetiously known as gassers. Gassers symbolize the commitment. Everybody ran gassers, from the oldest pros to established stars to rawest recruits. All the long summer, men who had won 17 consecutive games the previous season paid the price to get better, to return to the playoffs and improve upon greatness, to become the finest team in the history of professional football. The first step was the season opener against the San Francisco 49ers, but it was obvious that the machine was not quite ready. Miami fell behind 10-6, but then the Biscayne gassers came to the rescue. In the searing heat that reached 120 degrees on the floor of the Orange Bowl, the Dolphins kept their cool. With 4 Garo Yepremian field goals, they came from behind for a narrow 21-13 victory. Miami had won a record-tying 18th straight game, but had struggled in the process. Out in Berkeley, California, Oakland Raider fans figured the Dolphins were ripe for a skinning. Once again, the Miami offense was not quite right. George Blanda supplied all the Oakland points as the historic Dolphin win streak came to an end 12-7. The loss was sobering, but Don Shula quickly put it in proper perspective when he stated, "Maintaining the win streak would have been nice, but it wasn't our objective by a long shot. Our main objective is to get to the playoffs. That's all that matters." When Don Shula speaks, his team listens. The Dolphins would not lose again until they had clinched a playoff berth. Leading the way throughout the next 10 weeks was the no-name defense. The prime mover in the Miami defense is also its grand old man, number 85, Nick Bonaconte. Bonaconte anchors the middle, providing the stability of experience and leading by example. Flanking 85 are the tough young outside backers, number 59, Doug Swift, and number 57, Mike Colon. Their credo is quickness, whether running down a sweep or initiating the blitz. And when the blitz is picked up, an equally quick front four is set free. Once again, number 75, Manny Fernandez, was beating frequent double teams to put on the heat. At the other tackle, number 72, Bob Hines, was so steady, no one noticed him except the opposition. From the outside, number 83, Vern Den Herder, swooped in to pick the passing pocket, and number 84, Bill Stanfield, supplied 18 quarterback sacks. When Bob Matheson enters the game, the front four becomes 3, and his number signals a new defensive alignment. The 53 defense takes advantage of Matheson's versatility. At times, he joins the pass rush like a down lineman. At other times, he drops to a zone and adds another dimension to the pass coverage. Dolphin Team D is awesome, but perhaps its most devastating facet is the intricate zone pass defense. Each man finding his pre-designated slot, filling, jamming, choking every passing lane, while a worried quarterback searches vainly for the seam. Often, time simply runs out. Or finally, a pass of frustration is released into the waiting trap. The outer perimeters of the trap are patrolled by cornerbacks Tim Foley, Curtis Johnson, and Lloyd Mumford. But the heart and soul of the Miami zone are the middlemen, safeties Jake Scott, number 13, and Dick Anderson, number 40. A safety lives by intuition and affinity for the ball. There is not a better pair in football than Scott and Anderson. Whether coming up to meet a short yardage dive or cutting a receiver in half, they usually get their man. The Pittsburgh Steelers found out all about Dick Anderson during the first half of a Monday night game. Later, Shula called it the greatest half ever played by a defensive back. Against Pittsburgh, the NFL's Defensive Player of the Year totaled 4 interceptions for 121 yards and 2 touchdowns. While Dolphin team defense quickly reached its playoff peak, Bob Greasy and the Miami offense struggled to find the edge. Early season performance was inconsistent and sometimes downright strained. But the tools were there. A preseason injury to peerless Paul Warfield cut down practice time and left success inches away. But with proven pros like Greasy and Warfield, it was just a matter of timing, repetition, until the inches began to fall in their favor. In 1973, the potent Greasy-Warfield connection was used sparingly, but to great effect. Warfield caught only 29 passes, but 11 of those went the distance. But a healthy passing attack is based on balance instead of one superstar. So when Greasy looked to the other side, he found Marlon Briscoe, who led the team in catches. While Warfield and Briscoe balanced the outside, Greasy's passing game improved dramatically in the middle as tight end Jim Mandich joined the flow. Mandich stepped in when Marv Fleming was injured and chipped in his finest year as a pro. After a slow start, the precision passing attack came on strong. But the guts of Miami's growing powerhouse lay with the hard-rocked men of the offensive line. Number 62, Jim Langer. Number 66, Larry Little. Number 73, Norm Evans. Number 67, Bob Kuchenberg. And number 79, Wayne Moore. Five men coordinated like the fingers of a hand, opening awesome holes for the runners. A jitterbug named Morris and a bulldozer named Zonka. Larry Zonka is the consummate fullback. Unsubtle and direct, he offers no pretense to elusiveness, pursuing a straight-ahead course, punishing all who intersect it. They talk of Nagurski, Motley, Tank Younger, Steve Van Buren, yet it is unlikely that pro football has ever witnessed a power back to equal Larry Zonka. While Zonka follows the straight and narrow, Mercury Morris moves to the rhythm of a different drummer. An explosive package of nervous energy. His style can best be compared to a balloon blown up near bursting, then let go. Never have two more diverse talents coexisted in the same backfield. Never has a defense had so much to worry about at one time. The speed and the power united to form the ultimate ground-gaining weapon. Zonka and Morris are two-thirds of a unique three-back offense, which Jim Kick fills out with his deft pass routes and sure hands. No true team is complete without its special people. Once again, punter Larry Seifel filled his role to perfection, sending up sky-high spirals for the ball hawkers of the Miami bomb squads to run under. After 9 straight victories, the Miami machine seemed complete, but one last test remained before the playoffs would begin. The wear and tear of 7 exhibitions and 12 league games began to take its toll, and a sudden epidemic of injury left the Dolphins vulnerable to ambush. On a bleak Baltimore afternoon, the upstart Colts did just that with a 16-3 victory. The defeat was hardly a crushing one for a confident team that had already clinched its division. Yet certain results were ominous. 3 more mainstays joined the ranks of the walking wounded. Therapeutic Miami sunshine welcomed the Dolphins home to close the regular season against the Detroit Lions. Kuchenberg, Foley, Bonaconte, Fernandez, Morris, Moore, and Little were missing from the lineup. But the Miami machine didn't miss a beat, with Zonka and Kick setting the pace. The makeshift offensive line, which included Irv Goody, number 55, maintained the high standards of performance. Defensively, the no names included several new names, but still held ground impressively. Bruce Banyan, Larry Ball, Charlie Babb, and Malty Moore blended with regulars like Lloyd Mumford to stop the Lions stone cold. Against Detroit, one more criterion of lasting greatness was fulfilled. The machine now consisted of interchangeable parts, no one piece so important that it could not be replaced, while the machine continued to function at peak efficiency. Paul Warfield caught 4 touchdown passes for a 34-7 Miami victory. All Don Shula's summer camp goals had been accomplished. Just ahead lay the playoffs and the road to football immortality. First came the AFC playoffs and the eager young Cincinnati Bengals. Next came the AFC Championship and the confident Oakland Raiders. In September, the Dolphins had lost in Oakland. Now they would establish their dominance with a game-opening 80-yard drive. Even with Bob Kuchenberg's fractured arm in a cast and Larry Little limping, the machine rolled on, right over Little's block and into the end zone. On to Super Sunday to represent the American Football Conference against the Minnesota Vikings.